Well, hello and welcome back, witches. Today's episode 4 of the Witchin Sisters podcast, where we talk everything witchy. I'm Shannon and this is Shalon, and today we'll be talking about the witch's wound. Yes. And I guess too, we'll kind of touch base on how people are saying that being a witch has become like the trendy thing to do. But yeah, we're going to be chatting about that today, which should be interesting. We got some pretty interesting perspectives to share on that.
Yes, we do.
Yes, we do.
All right. I'm just going to call in sacred space. So we're just going to take a minute to center and ground ourselves and take a deep breath in, sigh it out, calling in our ancestors to help support us and in feeling safe in order to share and receive the messages that are coming through today, and call in any of our guides for support to help guide us and just to be open to receiving the messages that are coming through today. All right. What is?
Yes, lovely.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people I don't think know what a witch's wound is either. So I think we should kind of get into what that is. What do you think?
We can. Absolutely. Absolutely. The witch's wound is associated with us spiritual women who have a really hard time with actually opening up and sharing our gifts, or even speaking up for ourselves, or being seen, or even being like brave enough to share our gifts with the world. And that is all due from our past lives that we've had. It's from like basically being a witch in a past life, and most likely being burned at the stake for it, or like entrapment is another thing that happened, or punishment, or whatever happened to you, and it's being reflected in this lifetime basically, because that fear of death basically for your gifts runs very deep into your soul's DNA, right? And
yeah, death of being like the fear of being seen in any
fear of being seen. Yeah, absolutely. The fear of being seen, the fear of just like showing up in the world, the fear of like just authentically being yourself, basically, right? Because that's what it is. To be a witch is to be like authentically yourself and show up in this world. And when you have that underlying fear that it's like, oh my God, if I share my gift, or if I, share my voice or whatever, like I'm like going to be condemned for this basically. Right. And so we don't speak up. We don't share our gifts. We don't reach our authenticity. We don't reach our for our gifts. Some of us don't ever step into our gifts because the fear is so real, right?
True. So true.
Yeah. And like, I know myself personally, like, it took me a very long time, like up until recent, to really want to step into my gifts and start sharing them with the world and everything, and showing up more authentically as myself, because just the underlying wound that you don't even realize that you have. And until that was actually cleared, and I actually work with that with lots of the women that I work with, we do the clearing of the witch wound, because it's like a real thing and it's felt in your body. Like, I don't know if you've ever had that experience where you're like needing to show up or share some information or whatever it is, and it's like literally feels like fight or flight, or you're in like a life or death situation.
Absolutely. And I think all of us have different reasons why. Like, it could be even associated to how you were unalived at that time, like in your lifetime as a witch. So a lot of people have fear of water, or fear of being on a boat, or fear of fire, or scared to be in a forest alone, whereas mine kind of showed up more so in my sister wound too. My witch wound and my sister wound were very much associated as well, because betrayal was a big one as well. For a lot of witches, because they were betrayed by some of the people that they trusted the most and turned in for doing things that they didn't see as like inappropriate or dangerous, but um, put fear into other people when they could see the power that they had to heal or to manifest things in their life. And so mine kind of more showed up in that way personally. And honestly, it's kind of funny because I think about it. I'm like, I've always kind of been very vocal about being a witch my whole life in some way, shape, or form, especially as a young person, as a teenager and a young adult. I was always kind of kooky. I was the one that was always into like the tarot cards and doing like
Mm-hmm.
interesting things and learning about the history of Halloween or like other things, like trying to understand why I was so drawn to it my whole life. Really, I guess, just always put me out there as like, oh, she's a witch. Like, I think people always have associated me with that kind of thing because of
Mm-hmm.
how, different. I was different and I didn't really care that much, but, you know, I think it's just, it comes through differently for everybody as to why they have a witch wound and, how, it kind of shows up in their life now.
Absolutely. And you touched on that like fear of betrayal, right? Like that. And I think
Mhm.
that's why lots of women don't speak up and open up, right? Because you were betrayed at some point in time in a past life by another woman or another person
Yeah,
or whatever, right? And
for sure.
so we don't want to speak up. We don't want to share our voice. And it's just now you and I were talking about how like they talk about how it's trending. It's trending to be a witch. Is it really trending or
Mhm.
have we just all been witches and now we actually get to express it? Now we're in
Absolutely.
the
I so agree
in
with that. I can't, that just like hits home for me. I really do
right?
resonate with that so much.
Right? Like now
Yeah.
we are actually in a place where we can share our gifts without worrying about what other people are going to do to us in regards to that.
Absolutely. I think it's interesting too that I've said this to so many of my clients that have come to like understand that they also identify with being a witch or that they are a witch. I hate saying identify with being a witch. I gotta find another way to say that. But you know what I mean? Like they finally are coming to terms with that and willing
Yeah, like
to
embracing it.
openly say it out loud. And because I've always kind of like ran my business that way and kind of shown up as my authentic self and saying like I'm a witch, I've had a lot of clients say, "Yeah, I'm a witch too." And I just find that it's this I say this all the time to them. I'm like, "This is the one time, the reason why we're seeing a rise in this in witchcraft, I'll say, and women coming forward and saying I'm a witch is because it is the safest time in human history for women to show up in their power. Yes, there's still many dangers that women have to be aware of across the world.
Hmm.
But
Always.
right now, there's a rise of women coming forward because they are comfortable, they are safe. You're not going to be unalived, you're not going to be burned, you're not going to be, walked off the plank, like all of these things, hung, all whatever, anymore for just saying that, or for, like you say, practicing our gifts and actually um, using our magic and our divine feminine energy as well.
Well, and
Mhm.
that was just it. Like women who were more in their divine feminine energy in general and in their sensual, feminine aspect and whatever were seen as witches when
Absolutely.
really they were just like, more so embracing and embodying their feminine essence. And that
Mhm.
in itself is a shame. And like gratefully, like you said, we're in this era now where like we're able to show up. It's through rise of these of us women who are
Mhm.
stepping into our power and stepping our own gifts, and we're like going to help shift and change the world now because we need to.
Yeah.
Like there's actually no ifs, ands, buts, or maybes. We need to, like, it's us rising women into our feminine like power that are going to help change and shift the world right now, because we've lived in such a patriarchal society for so long, and it's about finding the balance finally now between the feminine and the masculine, right? Not one over the other, but both of us together, right?
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, one of the ways that I dug a little deeper with my witch wound was I had my Akashic records read, actually.
Yeah.
And through that experience, I found that, that wasn't the only time I had done an Akashic records and they had told me that I was a witch, but she was able to give me a little bit more in-depth detail about my experience. And I also did a past life regression once, and that as well, I came through as a peasant, but a witch. I was also a witch, but tied into both of those were the betrayal wound that I had spoken about. So when I did the Akashic records, she had mentioned, she's like, I have never seen someone who has been unalived as many times as being a witch as you have. She's like, you've lived at least 56 lifetimes as a witch, and you've been murdered every time. She's like, more specifically, beheaded.
It's crazy.
Right?
Yeah.
And which is pretty traumatic and gruesome. Actually, it's very gruesome. And some of the ways, like, we can touch more on that later, but the ways that women have been tortured and whatever for being witches, and how, with the stuff that they had to go through, I think that is also more reason for us to stand in it now as the women and the witches in this era that have the ability to do it, because of all of the women before us who didn't get that opportunity to live out their lives authentically and purely as themselves. And I think it's important for us to really step into it and continue the lineage of what witches really mean and what they really truly are and what they've really truly contributed to society before it was seen and deemed evil, right?
Absolutely. Well, and just the whole aspect that it was deemed evil to begin with. Do you know what I mean? That, like you and I were talking about how we came across that reading the other day about like a woman who had too much water in her well was classified as a witch because she was like abundant and flowing, right? And or that she worked with herbs, or you know, like she never got sick maybe, or she you know, like her garden was always flourishing or whatever, and she was seen as a witch because she was in tune with nature, because she was, you know, in her essence, because she was like flourishing in her life, and that was frowned upon. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And the fact that it was like punished and, you know, ended up in death in most cases is very concerning.
Yeah, and even like it made me think of that kind of I think it's a myth, but like I remember hearing at one point that like that's why we don't have a lot of pockets in women's clothes.
Okay, I was thinking about this too.
Back in the day, they thought that if you had pockets, like women could hide spells and hide things in their pockets.
Could hide magic in their pockets. That's why they got rid of pockets in dresses.
And all sorts of like herbs and things like that. Like they would be able to have this like secret thing. And I just find that so bizarre.
It's hilarious. And the fact that it was like men that were worried and scared.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Well, of
like,
course.
what?
Of course.
Well, of course.
And the church, let's be real. Like,
yeah. Oh, well, are we going to touch on that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I said it, but we don't have to.
When you were talking about your past life regression.
It's true. It's so true. It is true.
It is. Yeah. But, well, and how many of our witchy ways are actually like, you know, used
part of our everyday life. We talked about last week, right? Or last podcast. It's kind of wild.
It is wild. I remember, like, you were talking about your past life regression. I did have a past life regression, and I remember it was the first time I'd ever done it, and the lady was like just learning how to do it and stuff. And I do remember being taken back, and I could just see these shoes, right, and this like cobblestone street with this bridge and everything, right. And I just very distinctly remembered my shoes and my long dress and everything, and whatever. I didn't think anything of it. When I came out, I was like, did you get everything you wanted? And she's like, oh my God, that was like the most descriptive that I've had out of everybody. And I was like, awesome. And then I remember I was using one of my sister's oracle card decks, and it was the witches something. I can't remember what it was now. And it had those exact same shoes on the front of it, like the ones that I saw in
That's
my
so
past life
cool.
regression. And I was like, those are the shoes, like with the buckles, like, yeah.
Oh
I
my
was like,
gosh,
those are
Shalon,
the
that's what
shoes. It
I
was
was in
so
my past life
crazy.
regression. That's the same. I was
Same
also like
idea.
a peasant with like, I just
Yeah,
remember my
yeah.
long skirt with my
Yes.
apron. And I
Yeah.
was actually in a dungeon though. I was
Okay,
in a
no, I was like
dungeon
outside.
and I could see the people on the street outside. But what happened to me was I was, me and one of the other girls that were like servants in this castle, we were stealing silverware, like
Hmm.
candelabras and like any
Yeah, yeah.
silverware we were stealing because we were trying to like gonna sell it and then run away and get away, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
and she turned me in and she betrayed me and turned me in. And so that's when I was captured and thrown into the dungeon. And the vividness. And I know I'm not a period type show watcher, because even when I did it, I was questioning, like, is this just being pulled from my own mind, my own memories or
Right.
thought? But no, because I don't watch period pieces like that ever. And
Hmm.
so, like, I don't know where it was coming. Like you said, it was just like so detailed. So she
Yeah.
was like, it was very detailed, very much like you were this person, and I could vividly see myself when I would look, same as you, like looking down, I could
Hmm.
see
Hmm.
myself and my
And the
teeth and
shoes,
my
like with the
dress and
buckles. I don't know
everything.
why they
Yes.
were so vivid.
I
Like,
wonder if you were in the same town as me. You better
probably.
not have been the girl who turned me in,
Oh my
though.
God, could you imagine? I hope not. Oh my God, that would be horrible.
Right? Oh, but I was thinking that, so now I'm gonna have to like think about that. No, but honestly, like and that is why we connect so well, because we do have so many similar experiences in that way. And
Absolutely. Do you know, I actually just had a thought, and I was like, I wonder if you can do like a group past life regression. Is that a thing? To see how you guys were like,
like
how people were like interlinked in past lives.
connected.
I know this is like getting off the witch wound topic, but like, would that not be like, I wonder if that's a thing,
I don't know, but that's fascinating to
isn't
see
it?
if we have a connection,
Right?
like what our
What
connection would
is the
be.
connection?
Yeah, and how many
I'm
lifetimes we
like,
might have
maybe we
come
don't want to
together,
know.
right? What if
Yeah.
we've been
Like, but
like
wouldn't that be cool if you could do it like together?
so cool? You know what?
I wonder
I
if that's
am
a
going
thing
to
you could
have
do.
another Akashic record reading, and I'm going to ask her.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask her
I
if she
would,
could.
just to see.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll put a bookmark. We'll put a little like
Bookmark
pin
on
in that
that.
one. We'll come back
Yeah.
around and maybe do an episode around that.
Absolutely.
But definitely, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
But
Do
even
we want
just
to maybe just touch on what the Akashics are, Shannon, just so people know, because some people might not know what Akashic record readings are or what the Akashics are in
go
general.
for it.
Oh, it's
Yeah,
just like they're like your soul's library,
yeah.
basically, and you can go back into them, and whatever like lifetime is coming up, they can do like healing and clearing and whatever else for that
Yep.
is basically what it is. Or if there's any like
Generational, ancestral,
yeah,
you can go even forward. You can even go forward
right, yeah,
with your
because
Akashic.
your soul's library is already written.
Yeah, and when I actually try and explain to people what Akashic records are, I actually refer them to, weirdly enough, a Disney movie. It's called Soul. Have you ever seen it?
I don't know
No?
if I have now or not.
Oh,
I've
it's
heard of
so
it, but I
good.
don't know if I've actually seen it or not.
It's so good. They go into the soul, basically all of it,
Yeah,
and they have like the Akashic, they do the Akashic records and explain it a little bit and then like the soul's plane and all that, like, oh, it's so fascinating. So if you really want to learn a little bit in an easy way, go watch Soul. I mean, it's such a cute movie, but it's also really deep and interesting and easy to digest the information. But
Yeah.
I mean, you can look it up anywhere and do your own research, and I'm sure there's lots of people in your area that probably read. I mean, I personally don't read Akashic records. I can access my own, but I've never done a reading for another person.
I had mine done,
Yeah,
as you
I've had
have,
mine
but
done.
yeah, but I haven't actually like gone. I probably have and just haven't even realized it.
You know,
In
that's
all
true.
honesty, I'm working with
Yeah,
my clients and stuff because like past life stuff will all of a sudden come up. Do you know what I
that's so
mean?
true.
And so then we'll
Yeah.
like work through it and clear it and whatever it is we need to do in regards to that lifetime and stuff. So I very well probably have and just didn't even like really realize it. But
Well, look at you, girl. You got something else to dig a little deeper into
oh
and see, like,
yeah,
just another thing added to the list.
add that on there. Oh goodness, yeah. So what kind of, I don't know, what kind of like methods and stuff do you use with your clients in order for helping to support them with their witch wound and stuff? Because I know I do like the whole clearing, like the clearing of um what happened to them in general.
Well, for me, it's more about finding your practice, right? And I
Yeah,
really encourage them to start practicing um energetic hygiene, like we had talked about earlier.
yeah.
Before we started our little our not our
That'll
little,
be
our
it. That'll
amazing
be another
podcast.
podcast.
Yes, that will be another one and put a pin in that one too. We
Hmm.
have so many ideas, we
More
can't
to
keep them
come.
straight.
So much
Yeah,
more to
so much
come.
more to come, you guys, so much more to come. But yeah, I think for me, I really start to ask them like what their connections are to it, where it stems from, right?
Absolutely.
And not so much clearing their witch's wound as it is identifying it first. So I really
Yeah,
like to go into identifying your witch's wound. And that also comes in hand with like really trusting your own intuition about yourself and about your experiences and what messages you're receiving. So it really comes down to, like I always say, like start your hygiene practice, your spiritual hygiene, which is like cleansing, clearing yourself, setting a sacred space for yourself to connect with it as well.
that's
It
important.
doesn't have to be like a whole big room space like I'm lucky to have here. But, you know, I always say too, like you put a little tray together that you can tuck away in a cabinet, right? And then bring it
Yeah.
out when, like, if, especially if you have small space, right? You don't have a lot of space. So doing an altar, but really like starting to, when you sit in those practices and you start doing, you know, some meditation and going out in nature, you really do realize like what your connection to being a witch is first and why you feel that way, like why you feel like you might be a witch,
Hmm.
you know, and also start saying it, right? Start saying like, I'm a witch. I think I'm a witch. Because there's more often than not women that are witches and have always felt that way and have never said it. And so for me, yeah, that's kind of where I like to start with clients that come through that they're saying like, yeah, I think I'm a witch too. And it's like, let's get in touch with that. Let's figure that out. Let's go a little deeper. So for me, it's in the work, right? It's in the
Hmm.
work of
Hmm.
like shadow work, right? Starting there too. Like with a lot of that, we started out there and doing stuff like that to really get in touch with your finally opening up to the fact that you might be a witch and where you think that stems from, you
Hmm.
know?
Well, and
Yeah.
how important it is to actually make it a daily practice. Even if
Mm-hmm.
it's 5 minutes of just connecting with yourself every day to tap into your intuition
Right.
and just to be
Yeah.
in that. Do you know what I mean? Just to be in that quiet and that stillness and to just like connect and see what's coming up, what you're feeling in your body, even what helps strengthen your gifts and everything, I feel as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, one thing that during my practice while I was finding my witch wound, and after hearing how many times I had my head removed and been hung, I look back on my own health history, thought back,
Yeah.
and I struggle with like neck problems, and from a child, like from a 5 years old or younger, I've always had issues with getting like kinking my neck.
Mm-hmm.
And you think about it's like if
Mm-hmm.
I had been hung how many times, like why I would have issues all the time with my neck and
Right.
also have my head taken off. Like you think about that and the relation to that and like the headaches and the migraines and things like that I also get. I mean, there's also this worldly plane things that cause these issues as well. But when you really find that stuff out and you look a little deeper into yourself, you can attach that to something. Like I had said earlier too, with the witch's wound and being like, I having a fear of water or having a fear of fire or having a fear of
Mm-hmm.
height. Like
Yeah.
there's certain things like that as to why that might be
Or even,
related to how you died.
I was gonna say even like people who are like super claustrophobic and that kind of stuff too.
Right?
Like if you were just like in really small
Yes.
space. So
Mm-hmm.
do you remember when we were at the retreat? This just came to my mind, and we were talking about oh my gosh, who were we talking to? She was one of the speakers there. Gosh, her name, when I start telling the story, you might remember who it was. But she told a story there about being like trapped in the dungeon. Do you remember that? Being trapped in the
Mm-hmm.
dungeon in the basement? And how we had associated the fact that I like we would always call like I always called my basement the dungeon. Do you
Oh,
do you remember
no,
that story or not? Oh, I can't
Station,
even like
no.
I'm so bad at explaining it right now too. I'm butchering this, but and just like things that you like saying things like that, like referring to my basement as the dungeon, like obviously in a past
Mm,
life we like was locked in the dungeon, right? So it's like,
right,
okay, so like switching that narrative, because do I want to refer to my basement as a dungeon? Absolutely not. Do you know what I mean?
right.
I
Yeah.
want it to be like a, you know, a sanctuary basically, because like this is where
I
my
do
clients
remember
come.
this
Do you remember who
conversation
I'm
now, but I
yes, do
can't
you
remember
remember?
who was talking.
Deanne.
Oh, it was Deanne. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, name drop.
Mhm.
But do you remember her
Yeah.
story? Did you
Yes.
remember the whole story?
No, I don't remember the whole
Okay.
story, but I do remember us the word associations that we were going
Yeah.
through.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, but yeah, like irrational fears, like all of that kind of stuff are
Hmm.
things that definitely stem from like a witch wound, or like, you know, if you have a reaction to certain things now, like I said, like being claustrophobic or whatever, and how your body reacts to things that are maybe like not a rational thing to be like worried about kind of deal, right?
Hmm.
All of that can
And
definitely stem from a past life.
well, yeah. And you think about like what I was saying about my wound, my witch wound also being connected to my sister wound. During those times, I think too, there was a lot of betrayal happening and like turning on each other to save yourself. Like, and so that might be
That's the other
self-serving,
thing.
but
Yeah.
it was also self-preservation. So there's a lot of shame and guilt for
Mm-hmm.
people. So
Mm-hmm.
you can also come through with a lot of shame and a lot of guilt um in your life, and you don't know why. You always feel guilty for this or you always feel bad about that because you might have been that woman that turned in your best friend
Yeah.
and your coven and your, or even just your sisterhood, your sisters and or mothers to save themselves,
Yeah. And
right?
that's also like some like contracts, soul contracts that we have in this lifetime with other people where you're maybe overly self-sacrificing to other people is because in a past life, you very well may have like betrayed that person or
Mhm.
turned them in or whatever
Yeah.
else, right? And so now it's like about kind of like learning the lesson, balancing the scales, shifting the like the dynamics of the relationship or whatever. And so those are other things that need to be addressed. There's like so many things that come into
Oh,
play.
so true. So true.
Yeah. That we don't
Yeah.
even think about.
It
We don't
can,
even realize.
no, and it goes so deep sometimes that you don't even
Yeah.
realize. Like for me, it started with my sister wound, but I also at the same time was struggling with when I would go to these retreats, and you know this, and this is why we connected. When I went to these retreats, I was like the witchiest, like darker goddess energy in the space, and I just always felt like a little bit out of place sometimes. Because a lot of the women around me, no, this is nothing against the light and love, like energies in the lighter communities and such at all whatsoever. It's just about at that time and still now, I don't see a lot of dark goddess energy or the more dark witch energy. Not dark witch as in like I know people will associate that with like a bad thing, but
no.
I feel like as a witch, I do show up more in darker energy. As you can see, black hair, black shirt, black nails, like black. And then that is just natural to me. It's not a persona that I'm putting on. Like that's just naturally, innately who I am. And I've always been that way. And so I just always would go to these things and they're all in their beautiful light flowing clothes and so beautiful and flowery and fairy-like and goddessy. And I'm just like, I am all black. Like
I know.
I feel like I want destruction and fear and anger and like talk about more things like that. And I do remember my very first retreat saying something like, because they were talking about all these goddesses, and I was like, what about some of the dark goddesses like Lilith and like Sekhmet and like some of the other darker goddesses, right? And I was validated in that moment. It's just not as common. So now, like we were saying earlier, we're seeing a rise in women connecting to their witchy side, and it's becoming trendy because honestly, I'm not going to lie, Halloween has become trendy, and Halloween has been my favorite time of year over Christmas since I was a baby. Like
me too.
And I think, again, that's associated to being me always being a witch, and I just very much connected to Halloween. But, it's become trendy to love Halloween, whereas it wasn't really a big thing. Like, people had liked it, but it was not as big. It's become really popular, right?
Some people are like way more into it than they are into like Christmas and all that other kind of stuff, right?
It's become super mainstream, I guess you could say. And same as like being a witch. But I saw this thing on one of the pages that I follow where it's like, oh, now everyone wants to be a witch because Becky went and got some sage and she got some this and she thinks she's a witch now. And I was so offended by that.
Very much so, yeah.
Because guess what? Becky is a witch, okay? And Becky can be a witch even if she bought her sage and her parsley or her, herbs at Whole Foods or whatever. Like it's again like pinning women against women. What are you laughing at?
Her parsley.
Well, you do use like parsley and use all your stuff like lavender or whatever. You know what I mean?
But exactly. So I lost her there for a minute.
So funny, but it's true.
I know.
I don't care where Becky gets her stuff from.
No.
What I care about is that more women are stepping into their power and finding out who they are. And I don't care how she does that. I don't care if she does it just because she thinks it's cool, even because at the end of the day, she's going to make a difference and she's going to make an impact, even if it's on her own life. Right? And she's able to change her own life and make an impact on herself. So I really don't like when I see stuff like that about, like, I know there's cultural appropriation and sensitivities around that as well. I get that. But at the end of the day, we want everyone to come to the understanding of what it means to be in harmony with the earth and with spirit and with ourselves and with humanity. And that's what being a witch is about, right?
Being in tune and in touch. Absolutely.
Yeah, being in tune and in touch. Yeah. And so if Becky has to go and get sage from, or whatever, her parsley from the Whole Foods store, and let her do it. Let her do it. Let her thrive on that and, you know, make an impact in her world, wherever that is
Yeah.
and wherever that begins.
And I'm glad you kind of touched on the dark goddess, because I feel like the witch and the dark goddess, they're kind of hand in hand. They're one and the same, right? And I work so much with the
Yeah.
dark goddess energy, and that's just who I have
Mhm.
always been
Me
drawn to
too.
and always been called to, right? Why? Because you know what? The dark goddesses are the one who are like in the trenches with us. Like you and I are always heavy deep in shadow work, like within
Yeah,
ourselves,
we do.
bringing things to light. That's what doing shadow work is bringing these aspects to light,
Mhm.
right? And it's the
Yeah.
dark goddesses that are there. They actually really love us. That's why they're fighting tooth and nail for us and
Yeah.
helping us, right? Because they're the ones that are going to help us. They're the ones who have the power. They're the ones who have been shamed and condemned because they dared to be different, because they dared to speak up, because they dared to stand in their truth and be true to who they are, right?
Yeah,
They're the ones
totally.
who are going to help us to step up into our power and start to help change the world, right?
Mhm.
I actually
Mhm.
wrote something a while ago about how it's not like just the rise of the divine goddess, it's the rise of the dark goddesses, of all the goddesses, all of us working together hand in hand,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. And that's why I've just always been like so passionate about that and resonated with that for sure.
Yeah, and I also just don't hide within the light. Like
I can't even
like
pretend.
no, I can't
I
do
wouldn't
that.
want to. I'm like, I can't.
It's too hard for me.
Right?
I'm that girl who's like, if I don't say it out loud, you'll see it all
On
over
my
my
face.
face.
Yeah. If
Yeah,
my face doesn't say it.
yeah. If I don't say it out my mouth, you'll see it in my eyes. You'll see it on my face. You'll see it in my body language.
Mm-hmm.
And I think again, that's being authentic. And sometimes
Yeah.
authentic can come off as harsh. It can come off as rude. It can come
Yes.
off as
Yep.
bitchy and named all of these things. But at the end of
Mm-hmm.
the day, it's like I'm being authentic. I'm being honest. I'm not being hurtful. That's never my intention. I'm never
No.
intending to be hurtful. That's not what I do. But I also just don't hold back. Um, like I'm the kind of girl who's like, if you're doing like I'm that friend, like I will tell you that's not a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
might need to check yourself.
Yeah.
You know, because if you expect me to just
Absolutely.
tell you what you want to hear, girl, that's
Yeah.
not me.
Or
I'm not
anybody
like
in general, like, or being like
Mhm.
being too much, being too much. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
my
Like,
whole life.
can't
Yeah.
be less, can't be less. And if it's too much, then I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah. I can't be less. I just,
because
oh,
because what? Because women are outspoken, because women have an opinion, because women are actually saying what they want to say now. Like, yeah, I
hmm
can't. Like, I can't with some of that.
no. And, you know, I think also like I've always come off as a little bit of a mysterious person because I am also very private. As much as I'm an
Mm-hmm.
outspoken person, I'm
Mm-hmm.
also very private and I'm an
Absolutely.
observer.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that comes from a witch's wound as well, because
Yeah.
you really had to be aware of your surroundings. You
Oh
really
yeah.
had to be aware of who you were telling and who you were talking to, who you were interacting, who you would let see you do your work, do your
Mm-hmm.
magic,
Mm-hmm.
right? You had to be
Absolutely.
aware. So being in touch with your intuition was life or death,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah. That's exactly it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Should we start pulling some cards? Maybe.
Okay.
What do you have for today?
You want to go first?
Doesn't matter.
I have the same ones, girl, because I don't buy tarot cards. I
Oh,
just
I'm
don't.
sorry. I have my goddess oracle card deck is the one I was called to today. So we have obviously a goddess that has a
Ooh.
message for us. It's the goddess power oracle card deck.
Oh, I love it.
So let's see what goddess has a message for us today. Oh, okay. Lizzie, Revelation.
Okay.
29 is
Mm.
11 actually. If for anybody who's into numerology. So There are moments when synchronicity brings all the elements together for a flash of insight to rise up in you in a glorious epiphany. Whatever was not clear becomes crystalline in an instant. It's as if you are able to simultaneously perceive every facet in a diamond. You know without a doubt that you are on the right track as deep understanding sinks into your very soul. In this moment, change and transformation take place. We are, I don't know, right now, I don't know if you're not listening to the podcast at when we launch it, but right now we just entered Scorpio season, and Scorpio season is like all about transformation. Like this is like what we have been clearing for this whole year is always Scorpio season is always about coming out of the ashes, right? Especially shifting into this like new Aquarius age that we have going on here. We're like releasing the Piscean era, which is feeling very turbulent for some people because they're having a hard time of letting go of life the way it used to be, because we're stepping into this new era, right? And this new age, and everything's going to be different. Like I was saying to you, it's going to be less patriarchal, and it's going to start to shift. It's probably going to take years, but more so into this like balanced feminine masculine energy. You know without a doubt that you're on the right track as, oh, I read this deep, I guess I have to read it again. Understanding sinks into your very soul. In this moment, change and transformation take place, and a transcendent moment is offered to you as an extraordinary gift. Now is one of those times. The Chinese goddess Lizi, mother of lightning, love that, brings revelations into your life like a flash. She gifts you this as a result of all the hard work you have put into dismantling your old self. So like this whole year, we've been dismantling, letting go of aspects of our old self. And that's also about healing the witch wound, right? Those parts of yourself that you kept hidden, those parts of yourself that you were led to believe were true and were not, or the way that you were showing up in the world that didn't resonate with you, right? And we're letting go of all of those and starting to like step into our gifts, step into our authenticity, and really just like starting to like shine our own light, right? So so it says this is a very auspicious time is how it ends. This is a very auspicious time, and I would have to agree with that for sure.
I would agree with that too.
Right?
For
Yeah.
sure.
So what do you got for us? I was getting hot over while I was channeling.
The message for the collective. Let's see. Ooh. So I got sanctuary. Cave.
Ooh, yes.
Right? And we did talk about like how I was like my thing with people was actually to find your sanctuary. Like find your space,
Yes.
make your space. We'll see here. So it says, as the sun sets, the crescent of the new moon appears in the distance as this ancestral human creates his art, painting on the walls of the cave with colors drawn from the earth's substances. The fire warms him, the cave shelters him, and provides a refuge from the rest of the world. With its womb-like structure, it not only offers sanctuary, but also serves as a temple that houses his creative spirit, which eventually gives birth to the physical form of his artwork. Note how absorbed he is in his process. He no doubt has prepared for this creative ceremony by getting the fire going, mixing the colors, gathering his sacred objects. See, and this is what I was saying about practice, right?
Yeah.
Starting your rituals, your practices, like setting up your space, finding somewhere to go so you have somewhere to really like dig deep, right? Finding your sanctuary. That's really what you need to do. He's painting an image of a sacred spiral, one of the most ancient symbols ever discovered. It's been depicted in artwork found in a variety of cultures and occurs frequently in nature in exquisite mathematical proportions, such as in the shape of a nautilus shell, right? The spiral shell. It also shows up in burial sites around the world, representing the endless spiral of life, death, rebirth, the grand and the complex mystery so elegantly portrayed in a simple circular pattern.
So the message is this is a quiet, still place inside of you that will always be available as a sanctuary. Yet finding such a space in the natural world will enhance and complement this internal place of peace. So whether it is a cave, meadow, forest, seashore, or any other setting in nature, this is where you can see, hear, and feel the presence of the Creator in your surroundings. Let it become a temple for your heart and soul. Rather than having your computer, your television, or any other human-made device or activity be your sanctuary, allow yourself to discover the perfect place in nature where you can simply be and breathe. Doing so bridges the connection between the internal and external, facilitating a spiritual communion that allows your being to be aligned in dramatic and quiet reverie with all that is. In today's busy world, it becomes even more critical to set aside time for sanctuary, even if you have to schedule it in.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that really does go in hand with like what I was saying about how I work with women and their witches' wounds. It's like finding that space for yourself to really sit with yourself. And yeah, maybe it should be outside in nature. And I did touch on that because
Yes.
that's really where you're going to feel that connection. That's really where you're going to feel it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And the fact that you touched on like the whole like death and rebirth, right? That we do all the time. We
Mm-hmm.
spiral through that all the time. We are always like it's about shedding aspects of ourselves, right? That's what the death is.
Mm-hmm.
It's shedding aspects of ourselves that don't resonate with us, that we no longer need. It's about outgrowing, like this. What's coming to me is like the snake shedding the skin, right? Like they're constantly
Absolutely.
doing
Yeah,
that,
for
right?
sure.
And it's about just
Mm-hmm.
like stepping higher into who you are and your purpose and your gifts and your modalities and all of that stuff. And you were also saying about like, collecting your items. What are you called to? Like there is
Right. Like
no
I said with your
wrong or
altar,
right
like,
way. There's no wrong
mm-hmm.
or right way. Like women always want like, well, what do I need? What is the list? What do I need? Well, what are you called to when
Well,
you're
this
out in
card
nature,
says it all. Yeah, to
right? When
start
you're
out in nature,
exactly, what are you called to?
find a sanctuary.
Yeah, but like even
Mm-hmm.
when you're out there,
Oh, like
like
collecting
yes,
things.
collecting
Yeah.
things, collecting rocks, collecting feathers, collecting like whatever you come across. If
Mm-hmm.
you're called for it, to it, like you can add that to your altar, like whatever it is, whatever it is to symbolize what you're wanting for your altar, or like whatever just brings you joy or happiness or connecting with your ancestors or any of that. Like there is no wrong way. Women are so like, am I doing it wrong? Like there's no wrong way. If you're tapping in with
Mm-hmm.
yourself and you're tapping in with your intuition and taking that time for sanctuary and just trusting what you're called to, there's no wrong way.
There's no wrong way to be a witch. And
No.
sometimes I see these like things again. I'm going to go back to that as I see these things where it's like, are you this witch? Are you that witch? Are you a kitchen witch? Are you a green witch?
Yeah,
Yeah, you can associate with those things.
absolutely.
But if you don't, that's okay too. You
Yeah.
don't have to be one of these kinds of witches. You don't have to be Wiccan. You don't have to be pagan. You don't have to be any of the specific things to be a witch, right? And I think that's why we're seeing so many more women stepping into it because there is no parameters, and the fear, the veil of fear is being lifted
Yeah.
around being a witch
Yeah. Well, and
and it being evil.
yeah, and like whatever, if if there's going to be like backlash on it or not. But I feel like if we start like identifying with like, like being pagan or Wiccan or and having these rules and all of this other stuff to follow all the time, like then to me, like it's no different than being in
Organized
a
religion.
religion. Right. And I'm like,
Hmm.
I don't identify with that. I don't
Hmm.
identify with any of that because I just trust my own inner knowing and what I'm called to, right? Like,
Right.
and I think that's more so what it's about. It's not about creating barriers and boundaries and limitations or whatever. We want to be limitless. We want to like expand and break the glass ceiling on everything. So at least that's me.
Yeah, and I think the idea of what a witch is shifting. Like I said, I just don't think that you have to fit into a certain box to be
No.
one, and whatever that looks like for you. And so going into sanctuary and getting in touch with your gifts, like that is going to really like define your practices and your purpose
Hmm.
as well.
And I was just,
Because as we like to always say, being a witch means living in your world, this world consciously, powerfully, and
mhm,
unapologetically. So there's no reason for you to be sorry or concerned about whether or not you're doing it right or you're doing it wrong because you're conscious, you're aware, you're making choices, you're making decisions, and that is authentic. As long as you are not hurting, there's no harm for yourself or for anybody else, then what are you doing? Right? Like it's all relative, I say.
no, absolutely. And as you were talking, I was just thinking about how, like, in this lifetime now, what we're doing is like revisiting gifts that we had from our witchy selves in past lifetimes, or high priestesses, or
Hmm.
goddesses, or whatever we
Totally.
were.
Hmm.
Right. And so,
Yeah.
like, what if you
Yeah.
were multiple of these witches? What if you were like a kitchen witch? And what if you were a like medicine witch? And what if you were like whatever? And you just use all of those different aspects in this lifetime now for different things that you need, right?
Oh, I love that. I love
Right?
that. Yeah,
Because we
I
all
love that.
have been, like, we are never just like one and the
Yeah.
same. We've been probably multiple different things in every different lifetime. So what if now we're just like tapping into those whenever we need them?
And really, that comes down to just what your gift is. So maybe your gift
Exactly.
is being in, like working with herbs, right?
Hmm.
And making spells. And maybe you're a garden witch. Like it's okay if you do identify, but again, like you don't have to be one of those things. And if you don't know what your specific gift is, that doesn't mean that you have to be one of those things to be a witch, right? You
Exactly.
will find that through practice,
Exactly.
through ritual, and through creating space for yourself to explore that.
Hmm. Beautiful. Beautiful,
Hmm.
beautiful. Well, are we ready to wrap this up?
I guess so. What is this, episode 4? That's
Yes, it
amazing. I love how
is.
far we've come.
Such
And
a
there's
good
so much more.
conversation.
Obviously, we have so much to talk about.
Hmm.
We're just like writing things down. Like
As we
next
go.
time, we want to talk about this. We want to talk about that. We're
And things
building,
always
we're
come up as we're
creating.
talking. Absolutely. It's all about the flow.
Always. Yeah.
Hmm. All
I love
right.
it. Well, thank you guys for being with us. We appreciate you. And please do like comment down below, share our podcast. Like, let us know what you think.
Or what, what else you want us to talk about and touch base on as well.
Yeah,
If you have
yeah.
any
Like, if you have any
questions,
questions,
absolutely.
always let us know. Reach out to one of us or leave a comment.
Hmm. All right. Well, this was a beautiful interaction, and I thank you all for being here.
Yes, thank
And
you.
we'll just wrap everything up today. And I hope that you all had a beautiful interaction with us and got all the little tidbits and everything that you needed. And until next time, so it is.
Until next time. So it is.
Mm-hmm.